Well, welcome everyone to the second edition of System Override. We are so excited this week. I can't believe the articles around workplace that were in the news this week. So before we dive in, how's your day going, Bri?
It is not bad. It started very early. It's been a very busy week. I love how the first episode, it was like, oh, I have to be presentable. And then this time, like, Fridays are frazzled. I like came on. You're like, take off those shitty blue light glasses. You can't wear them on the thing. My hair's a mess. It's been a lot of late nights, but it has been a really good week. And so, like, I think that's the thing. It's been busy. There's been a lot of wins, but there's been a lot of late nights to make those wins happen, as there is. And
Yeah.
and you can all see it in my appearance today.
You know, I was thinking like our calendars were jammed this week. Like we were looking for 15-minute slots and we couldn't even find them.
I
But
know.
the outcomes from the week, just
Yeah,
reflecting back, makes our
found it. I
hearts
didn't even
sing.
do that it was a good week.
It was a great week. Okay. But in that busy week, did you do the action from last week and compliment a stranger?
I did.
Yeah. And
Yeah. I mean, they were kind of like, but also really loved it. Like they were like taken off guard, but also like really appreciative after. And like that's what I love. Even when people give me feedback, when someone will be like, "Can I give you some feedback?" And you're like, "Oh God," and then they tell you like good feedback and not like critical feedback, and that's always the most like surprise and delight thing to me. It makes like my whole week, and so I feel like it has that same impact. You're just like, I thank you, so random, but like so lovely, and so yeah, it was good.
yeah. Yeah, me too. And I actually the first time I did it, the person was really surprised and then this big smile came over their face. And so when
Right?
they're smiling, of course, then you smile. And so then we like giggled a little bit. And then I felt like, well, I just have to keep doing this because it felt so
Great.
good. And that I ran into so many situations that I had the opportunity to compliment somebody I didn't know.
Yeah. But what a
Yeah.
great strategy for even just like bridging the gap. I find like
Yeah.
people like compliments. People always like to feel good about themselves. Even in work, like when you're trying to like win over a new stakeholder, I'll use that tactic all the time. And it's like a genuine
Hmm.
compliment, but I think it's like something nice to connect on out of the
Yeah,
gate.
I think it's a good point. And, even sometimes when your energy's low, that might be an interesting way to just like go out and find somebody to compliment because you're gonna receive it back.
Yeah,
Meaning like it's gonna make you feel better. And yeah, I think there's some good things about that.
I like it.
We learned lots out of that action. I know. See what happens this week, see what the action is for this week. But before that, let's jump in. Okay. So we saw a story this week that really thought that businesses have won the return to the office debate and that fewer employees are saying they're going to resign this year based on being forced back to the office. What do you think about that?
I think that is compliance at it. I mean, what are people going to do? It's a tough market. It's really hard to get new jobs. Like, it's just like you put people's hands behind their back and like if anyone's high-fiving over that thinking like that's a win for them as a company, I think that's scary because I was actually pulling together some stats and I think it for something else, but it's very tied and there's this whole now I have to look at the exact wording of it because I'm going to forget. But it's like 8.8 trillion is what is costs the global economy in disengagement. And I had think that as a big old disengagement sticker slapped right on top of it. They'll be there in body. Will they be there in spirit, engagement, whichever? Certainly not. And people are resentful. Like when they have to do something when like they're resentful about it too, they're like gonna extra go out of their way to try and like screw you over. Like they're gonna start like wasting the coffee creamer. They're gonna start, you know what I mean? Like it's crap like that too. It's
That's a good point.
like notebooks and pens. Fine. If I have to be back here, I'm taking all the stationery. Like people just do stuff like that, which is wild to me, but they do.
Okay. But I'm going to take the perspective of the business, right? Because bums and seats gets me productivity. Bums and seats gets me revenue generation, even if they're not 100%, working at their top. Isn't that better than, when they're working from home and maybe they're not working at all?
I mean, I get like where you're coming from as someone who runs a business. Like I'm not going to not say like there's some assurance and understanding what people are up to. But like bums and seats does not like I think that's such a archaic concept and I love how you're playing devil's advocate for us right now. And who knows Shannon's like she does not.
Hey, you don't know. Maybe I'm like,
Good combo about it here.
maybe I am tracking everybody at lead to make sure that they work.
Well, yeah, maybe you're tracking me. It's a scary trail, I'm sure.
Yeah, obviously it's this one is a different, I do want to bring both sides of that story because obviously this was a trend that businesses didn't stop
Yeah,
even when
yeah,
employees were starting to quit, right?
yeah.
Like businesses have been so adamant on this one, which is so interesting. Like we didn't build our culture around this
No,
philosophy at all.
no.
So clearly we think there's a different way of doing work. But it is really interesting that the mindset of the people in control of the financials
Yes.
think that this is the best way to do it.
Well, I think it's like when it's a plan on a page, sure. And I think
Mhm.
that's the thing. It's like you can make numbers in the plan on the page look like anything. I came from projects in oil and gas. You can design anything to look like anything on paper, take it to the field and try to build it in real life. And you get a lot of headaches and phone calls and scope changes that you understand this is actually like physically impossible to build it this way. Or, you didn't consider these other factors. And so think I think as a company, it's like what are you trying to get out of, like, your work? Like, I think that's the big thing. It's like, work back in for work's sake. I don't align to that. Like, do you have things you need to accomplish? Like, what? We are in office sometimes, like, as the team, like, because get something out of being together. We get something out of that energy, and that collaboration is important to us in a certain way. But we work from home, and I think it's less around the, like, prescriptive, are you here, are you there? And, like, that's our whole thing is, like, flexibility. And it's so, like, from a company perspective, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, I'm hearing all these companies like they have these EDI initiatives. They have, or maybe they're calling it something that's not EDI anymore, but it's still, how are we going to work, to make this workplace inclusive and work for, it's like, well, that doesn't work for parents, moms, any of that. Like, I'm going to take that track right now because that's very personal to me. I've got young kids and it's like, get fucked. You're just making my life so much harder, like so much harder. And it doesn't need to be, and I think everyone's just really not tolerant. I mean, they obviously are in physical attendance because 'cause they'll be there, as the article had said. Like, in it's just gonna increase in other ways. They're gonna be stressed, they're gonna be burnt out, like, all these things are still gonna, like, so I think that's the what are you trying to go for, and what recipe are you putting into it? Because, like, I think what I see is there's not a lot of intention thrown around a lot of these things, and so it's like, I'm a company, I'm trying to make chocolate pudding. And I'm putting in all the ingredients for a vanilla cake, and then I'm shocked at the end why I don't have a chocolate pudding, and it's like, "Well, okay, you want inclusion, you wanna be able to, like, create these bridges, or you're trying to increase engagement, but, like, you're putting in an ingredient that actively can, erode from that if you don't put in the other right like, you didn't add baking soda. That will offset it, and create it as something positive and powerful, but did you do that? No, you put in baking powder. Well, that didn't work or whatever. And so I think that's how I feel. But there is something very real from the company side. So I'm curious,
Yeah.
like some other
Like, I
thoughts.
think that ultimately, and I think there's interesting to look at a stat on, loss of productivity. But if that loss of productivity is less being in the office than out of the office, the bottom line for a business is going to go up,
Yep.
right? And the
Yep.
other thing is that it's probably still cheaper for them to have body in a job than it is to continually have turnover because we know how expensive turnover is. And so I think that I get that. And I get, as much as I don't necessarily love the way in which return to work has been done, return to office, I guess, because I think that the communication and the purpose has created some undue hardship on people. And we know that anytime you can actually make the communication much more enduring and about, to create the
Mhm.
ability to really get engaged and on board with what the company's wanting to go to,
Yeah.
you're gonna get less resistance and you're gonna get more compliance with loyalty. We're just finding that part isn't smooth. But I do think that there's probably a case of where businesses will see a higher increase in profitability coming out of the forced return to office.
And I think like 100%, I agree on that. Agree. Like, I don't think you can deny that there will be companies who do see that. And I think from the other side of the fence, it's like, you know, again, back to what are you trying to get out of it and what kind of company and, like, what kind of and, like, also, like, are you measuring that in, like, picture? Like, I think what you're saying, true. I think that is true. Productivity might go up. What does that translate into profitability? TBD. For each company, that might be different. But then when you look at the expense side to the business, when it comes to exactly what you're saying, like the churn, the kind of costs that come associated with in and out, knowledge loss. So I think it's just like for your company, what's right and how are you managing that macro picture with those variables? Because for some company, they might be like, stamp it. That's the
Yeah.
culture we have, and this is what we're doing. And I think the biggest thing, like you mentioned, is like the communication piece. It's like just have
Yeah.
people understand what they're there for and what you stand for and how you feel about it. And then at the end of the day, it's the employee's choice to decide whether that's the right environment for them or not. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to create something, I think if you just you can't have the crisscross. People have the autonomy, but it's also a really hard market for jobs right now. And so like I feel for people because like what if you're in that position where you're in a company, it's become apparent to you, you maybe didn't do enough dating and getting to know what that was as you were getting into it. Now you're here, you need a job, and
Yeah.
you just realize they are very not values aligned to your values. Now what the hell do you do? It's like, okay, well now I'm
That's
very
right.
stuck.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think and I think that that's the companies that will really win through this, that were really, hardcore, said everybody had to return to the office. And of course, we always hear in the media what the media wants to tell us about it, not necessarily what was really said and how they were trying to do this over a period of time. But once everybody's back, is
Mm.
you really have to ensure that you've got great leadership, great communication that is constantly making sure that those people feel like they're having a bigger impact, that they actually are going to get something out of this. Because if they feel that they could run their household, potentially have a second job to keep up with the economy and the inflation, and from home and still do their job well, and then they go into the office, they've had to kind of make other arrangements for those other things and they don't get any increase, or
Yeah.
and I don't mean what that increase can be. That's not monetarily necessarily, but opportunities to do other things, ways to grow,
Yeah.
ways that companies can recognize the commitment and the impact of their employees. They don't get those things. That part will turn into what I think you're talking about, where they will quietly stop doing the good job they were doing from home, and it may lead to much higher costs on the health benefits side, from short-term disabilities, burnout, stuff like that, sick
Well,
days.
I think the other interesting thing too is like we're making the assumption that being at home is less productive. And like I'll put my hand up as someone when I'm at home, I'm more productive as far as like a company output and something company would care about in that way. In the sense that I have fewer like because I have dropping kids off, I'm getting kids ready, I'm dropping them off at school, I pick them up after school. My husband's schedule is weird. And so like he'll pick up on days that he can, but like he's in super early and doesn't like it doesn't align with the school day. And so it's like I have to work that into my day. And so I'm closer to the school if I'm at home. It lowers my commuting time and
Yeah.
I feel like I could just like be right back at my desk. You know what I mean? And if I'm at home, I am like able to manage my life in a way that, I can have food that I need to make me more productive and like I don't forget to pack a lunch because I don't have time for that or like things like and then I got to go get a lunch at work and I am a super social butterfly and a very team-led person and so when I'm in the office, I'm there to connect with people. I'm here there to have those conversations, but like as far as like getting shit done, like
Right.
no way like that's
No.
happening for me at the same degree here. Now I'm in a leadership position, so I also like need to be engaging. But when I wasn't a leader, it's like it's just I can't help myself. In the olden days, someone walked by and they're like, "Hey, want to see these pictures of my dog?" I'm like, "Yes, show me them all. Let's take a moment. Of course I have time for this. Let's make time. Do you want to get a coffee while we do it? This is really important." And so like that people connection piece is something I can't walk away from, when
Yeah.
people want to engage and connect that way. And so like I I get way more shit done at home. I just need to barricade myself in a little room where, like, I can't catch, you know, somebody's eye across the desk because next thing you know, we're like, like talking about
Well,
something.
and it's a really good point, right? Like we see it in our individual contributors too, that sometimes when you it doesn't feel different whether you're at home or in the office. So it is on leaders to pull them to create those connections, to um, make them feel good about having those connections at work and optimizing the time when you're in the office, because you those connections, those conversations, those little tidbits you
Like
pick up from
leadership.
having lunch with a group of people from the office, like all those things actually lead to to contribute to the success of your career. And so
But
that
also
may
the
be lost on
environment,
some people
you know? Yeah,
on being returned. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So this is interesting. I didn't even think this when we planned this, but this topic actually kind of flows nicely into our second topic, which we think is a huge breakthrough, right? Like we think that the fact that there's an article about weighing the what are companies doing with the excess capacity, let's call it created by AI. Not the ones that are laying off people, but the ones that are keeping their people, they're making their jobs easier. They're
Mhm.
taking away some of the manual or menial type of things that they did in a day. But what if they took that extra capacity and they actually invested it back in the development of their people? How's that topic for you today?
Everything about that topic. And I think there's such a powerful thing if done well with the ability, and I think how do we safeguard ourselves over the idea of this like busy for busy sake? Because, you know, we were certainly talking about this before we started airing. Like AI is going to create that human element of how you need to engage is going to be much more up here than just like task
Mm,
oriented, you know, lower executing function in your brain. Now you're going to be more in the judgment factor and decision making and being creative. And that takes a lot more brain power. And then you move into more of that kind of a space. Like you think of artists or writers or anyone, like there's this time of needing to just coalesce in your brain and just like, you know, not always be directly trying to pound out a deliverable, because to make those things happen you actually have to allow other things which
yeah.
feel active as far as like a visible, and create that space, and also like growth for your own self, like on your own path, and like continually loving yourself up in today's, you know, world and marketplace that we're looking at for the workforce right now. And so I think I love this concept. I'm just so curious how it's going to be put into action. And I would love to hear some of your thoughts.
When I was reading this article, I remembered back to almost a year ago when we were having that conversation where we were like, imagine a workforce where you had it was healthier, right? Everybody wasn't feeling like they were running on fumes all the time, didn't feel like they were, tied to a desk. They needed to be like pounding on a keyboard all day long because that was the expectation. And instead to a workforce that had the fluidity to take a time and go refresh their brain, knew that they weren't being creative and they could take an hour and go and maybe learn something personally that would help bring them back to a place where they were creative. Or maybe it's just go and listen to some really energizing music,
Yeah.
so that they could recharge, and they would have time in a day to do that because the AI is not needing them to be constrained, or not needing to get like through some tasks that had to be done in a particular time frame. But instead, you're getting the same outputs, but you're doing it in a way that takes the brain power of a human and couples it with these amazing technology in the AI. So I think we're still a long ways from that little fairy tale I just described.
Not a fairy tale, Shannon. It's could be the future.
But it could, right? Like now we're seeing articles and we're obviously seeing businesses that are like ours that are building on this concept and are saying, "Hey, okay, we valued you to get these kind of outcomes done a year ago. A year later, we have a tool that saves you some time, say 20% of your time. We still value you to do that. Let's take that 20% and reinvest it in the human capacity to make our humans better and our
And the
humans
people
stronger,
inherently better.
right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And I think I think there's going to be places. We always see businesses that, have different cultures and stuff, but this is definitely a growing theme in the corporate culture.
Where do you think I especially am interested to hear your thoughts because you have led large teams, like, where do you think this starts in action? Do you think it's a top level leader initiative? Is it a mid manager level led initiative? Is it a down to the individual taking ownership? Like, I'm just wondering, like, how do we make this real into something that actually turns into something positive, and who wrangles that and who drives that in the organization or in the team?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I can think about two different scenarios. One from the bottom up,
Mhm.
where employees are kind of bringing AI technology into the workplace and talking to their leaders about how these tools are helping them do things and showing them how they can get outputs, but in a way where they actually add in, they have more time to really think about the strategical sides, really weigh out the risks and the benefits of anything, which we know today. Sometimes all the time is just focused on getting the spreadsheet built, right? Here's the spreadsheet, look at the spreadsheet, but nobody really is thinking about what do
So
those numbers mean in real world, and what could be the impacts or unforeseen circumstances. We don't always get there. And the
Mhm,
beauty is the human brain does that stuff, not the AI
mhm,
necessarily, right? So I think there could be a really strong movement from your employees are embracing it, your employees are educating and then some companies will move up. When you get to big corporations, though, where the change management is enormous and getting 50, 60,000 people to all change and think about workplace in a different way, yeah, it is going to have to come from the top of the house. You are going to need, because in those kind of situations, have to they have structures, and those structures protect them. They're risk mitigating. There's things that, one decision over here would have multiple domino effects over to other parts. So there'll have to be much more care and attention to it, but it could be a little bit at a time, right? Like you could say, like, across the board, we saved everybody 30 minutes. That 30 minutes is now dedicated to make sure that they do one thing for their professional development this week. Something like that. And again, maybe, got to trust your employees that they're going to go and do that. But my guess is, in today's economy and the way people are thinking about their careers and how interested they are in AI, that they will go do that. So I think there's some really cool ways of doing it, but it's not an easy change. There's no doubt. Like us, we can make the change in minutes, because when
yeah,
you're a nimble tech company,
yeah.
we thrive on these kind of changes. But unfortunately, that isn't the case when you've got businesses that have been built on a particular foundation for a
Yeah.
long time.
I really love something you said around like the individual and how they can use that to create more of the so what tie. Cause I was just thinking, in that change space as individuals, like, and having them champion it, because a lot of the time I think the narrative around an individual using AI and not, it's almost like your dirty little secret sometimes. You don't want to share it to your
Mm,
leader. They'll be like, oh, so you're screwing around, not actually working. You just have like, there's still that kind of like mentality around it in more traditional culture. And so I love that framing about how individuals could actually take ownership over that narrative and not treat it as like "Oh, I hope my boss doesn't find out I've got, these three
yeah.
AI tools going on," and actually show their own level up, like you just said. And then that helps, like, one, you're gonna look great if you know how to navigate that combo to say, hey, I'm using this and yes, but then showing up in a way that ties to business results. Because ultimately, that's what all leaders, you're helping them if they're not having to bridge that gap as much to the front lines or to their teams, and that you're equally meeting them and making suggestions. Anyone listening, that's a huge win. That's a huge
Yeah.
win with your leader if you can show that. So I love how you laid out that narrative of them bringing it forward in that way, just knowing there's a lot of people who aren't. And then I've seen a lot of really positive, because then all of a sudden they're seeing the value and they're like, oh, and then it's creating an organic, affiliation with this movement and like kind of starting that drumbeat that's needed sometimes in big
Yeah.
organizations to make change, because they're just seeing it in actual reality. Like, oh,
Yeah.
Steven did this. He brought it forward. He took initiative. He's actually like very leveled up to the business side too, and it's helping him level himself up.
Hmm.
That's going to help us. We should do this and like helping create that narrative instead of it being that other narrative, which I think ties to the story we just talked about in the return to work, that old guard mentality of like, well, yeah, you're just pressing the Homer Simpson button and what am I paying you for then? You know what I mean? Like you don't want that to happen, but it could tip into that space.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's an interesting. It'll be interesting to see because if I think back to some of the, the highest performing teams that I ever led in the big corporate world, those teams were always empowered through their direct leaders, like frontline lead managers and stuff. They were empowered to get to develop themselves through coaching, through feedback, through performance, or through bringing ideas to the forefront because they felt like they were having an impact. Did we implement all of the ideas that they brought? Absolutely not. But the action of being able to bring something and be heard helps people to develop. And particularly if the leaders have their own capability to, provide feedback as to, well, maybe did you think about it this way? Did you think about what outcomes might be and why it might not fit right now? It just helps people develop their ideas and bring even better ones. And for sure, those teams also had the lowest
Yeah.
turnover,
Well,
right?
I love that you've now taken that from the front line into the mid-level tier because let's talk about that. That is a huge layer of wrought with peril in that
Mhm.
mid-level manager because how can this actually help one, how can it help them? Because I would argue it's one of the hardest roles in an
It
organization.
is.
And that's why and it's never winning. It's so hard and it's never winning, and, like, I think in that role, like, you're accountable for actually making things real to the front line, but you hold all this accountability into driving that up. You have things mandated down on you that you have to then execute to the team, whether you agree with it or not. So it's like you're trying to push-pull a lot of the time between 2 separate forces and create a win for everybody.
Right.
And you're usually way
Really
over
hard.
so, like,
Yeah.
how can we look at that layer? Like, let's move up a layer. How can it help them? And how can it help them with their team and, like, help them succeed up with
Right.
their role?
Well, this for me is a no-brainer, right? Because that team usually has a significant number of direct reports. And the most important way for a manager at that level to impact their direct reports, which are usually frontline individual contributor type of roles, is to spend time with them, is to observe them and provide feedback, is to work through problems with them.
Mhm.
And what we find in that role is so much manual, repetitive task stuff has been put into
Administrative.
that job,
Yeah.
and AI can eliminate that stuff for them, right? And so by being able to bring AI into that level and let that level explore what they want with it, obviously we want to put controls in. I'm not saying just let them cowboy this up. Like that's not what we're talking about. But being able to use those tools in a respectful way to mitigate those manual tasks and let them spend time with the humans. That's because that when we get back to that, those managers will feel better. They will have time to really have an impact on the career development and the productivity of the team that they lead. And the company will see
Yeah.
results. Hands down, that will work. Yeah.
I love that. I love that whole narrative around because it's so true. It's the real life walking the floor or the check-ins and that and like helping to guide and lead in that way. I also think that layer has to do so much managing up. And I think there's such an ability for AI to help streamline that. Because I think sometimes what happens is there's so much managing up, the mid-level management layer winds up that's most of their time is just trying
Yeah.
stop the dragon's, breath
Right.
coming down, and so I think there's a huge opportunity for that level of the organization to look at AI to one, you have 2 customers. Your down customer, I think you totally covered for how you can support your team, and that's in just giving you time. And then in your upward customer of the executive level of the organization, it's gonna give you time, but also the ability to tell that story. Because that's the most important if you're managing up is, like, how do you tell the story of what your team is doing and those wins? in a way that aligns to the business goals and outcomes that you're being tasked to. And I think AI can help level the playing field. That's a hard thing to
Yeah.
do. Like, it's a really
It is
hard
a
thing.
hard thing.
I've had
Yeah.
to do it time and time again, and it is not easy,
Not
and it's a
easy.
recipe, of how to do that, but I think AI can actually really help normalize the playing field for people to do that easier, faster, better, smarter in a way that it's less languishing and misconnections and that, kinda
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, we might as well
Okay.
bring up what's the or do we have to go to the next one? Let's go to the next
No,
one.
go in more.
I
Go
was
go
gonna
with us.
say, like, do you wanna talk about the executive level then? Like, what is their role
Mm.
in this? Like, if we're gonna do the bottom 2, we might as well do the
That's
top,
true.
you know?
Yeah. They're to just get out of the way.
Get out of the way. Put a stamp on it and get out of the way.
Like sometimes that is the
Yeah,
truth.
it is.
Sometimes, probably the best executives are the ones that have been able to, integrate AI into their organizations in a way that really did have a profound positive impact.
Mhm.
And that can be defined in many different ways, not necessarily just financial or not just capacity, but did it in a thoughtful way. They actually did get out of the way, right? They
It's
said, "Hey, I'm not an expert at AI because you've been a CEO or a C-suite person for 20 years, but you're an expert at that." And so you got out of the way. You gave the AI experts to come in and decide where this was going to happen best. And those companies are flourishing.
use ChatGPT to manage your own anxiety. Use it as your
Yeah,
the biggest thing I've
that's
found.
exactly
The hardest thing when you get to executive level is, like, how do you get out of the way, but how do you get out of the way and also just manage your own crippling
right.
anxiety of whether things are
Yeah.
working, not working, and then, like, having that relay down into the organization. So I think that's, like, the best advice. I love it for
I
executives. It's
feel
like,
like Bree just
start
exposed
terrified.
herself to having a chat GPT counselor.
No, I hire real people for that. I hire real people for that, but if you don't wanna do that, like, use AI. It's there. You can do.
But I did think, like, we speak to lots of CEOs and C-suite and leaders that even over the last year, we've seen sort of migrate from absolutely not, this stuff is dangerous, it, ruin my business. What if it makes a mistake? All the way to now they're getting into implementing and that sort of thing. So I do think you're right, right? As people kind of lessen their anxiety, learned a little bit more, realized they weren't experts in this, then they did get out of the way.
Maybe there's something there too around, like, because you do still need to set, like, the strategy, and so it's like, get out of the way, but get informed. So maybe it's like, get
Yes.
informed and assume positive intent. Like, you have people on your team to manage risk, and they will be the experts who know, like, how all these things can go wrong. Like, they will ensure that's a part of the conversation, but, like, you don't need to go searching for it yourself because that's not your job. But, like, how can you, set get informed, get the right people in the right places, which is the get out of the way part. And then how can you integrate this in a real way into your strategy? And how can you learn? So, how can you get the answers you need
Yeah.
from the testing or the implementing
Yeah.
and, like, use that to inform the strategy, and then
Right.
you set the tone of where this can take the organization, but maybe put yourself in that assuming positive intent if it feels uncomfortable to you, just so that you can get, because you can't be creative for something you are inherently thinking is bad, you know what I
Right.
mean, or it's inherently.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. And we'll
yeah,
just put one more warning label on this for all C-suite. AI will make mistakes as your humans make mistakes. So
yes.
it's not an inherent risk that it's not going to be 100% correct. Like that is just the way things are. So we hear that so often, and that's the number one. Get that one out of your head because yes, they are going to make mistakes just like they're humans, and that can't be the reason not to execute on this amazing technology that is bestowed us.
But, like, the human mistakes, like, what was that article in the news that one of the Big 4, they had someone, like, forecast something wrong. It was, like, a huge miss, and they lost so
Yeah,
much with a client. I can't
for
even remember
sure. Seen
now.
massive mistakes
Like,
before.
massive mistakes people
Right.
make. So it's like, we have to be tolerant that we
Of
can make
course.
mistakes with AI as we're
Yeah.
figuring it out. Knowing, like, we accept massive mistakes by people. Obviously, we don't want them to
Yeah.
happen, but it happens.
Okay, we better get on to our last story of the day because we're going to run out of time. But this one is an actually age-old story. Interesting to see it surface again this week, but it is this classic of moving one expense from one side of the financial statements over to another line at the financial statements. And what I'm talking about, it was actually framed as the Hunger Games of layoffs, meaning that, companies consistently lay people off. You often start with the most expensive employees in the business, meaning long tenure, great institutional knowledge, really know how to be very effective and efficient. And then they replace them like 2 weeks later. There's a whole big, and no offense to consulting firms, but consulting firm in there that's quite expensive that needed to come in to actually get the work done and move the business forward. And so clearly it's pretty obvious how I feel about this. How about you, Bri? How do you feel about this topic?
I just think it's such a performative, like, throw it to the analysts, try to gamify your stock price.
Yeah.
Like, it's again one of those things
Yeah.
where it's just like, yes, on paper, will that create a result or something? Sure. But exactly to your point, and like I live that in past industries that I've been in where it's just like the utter crashing halt that comes to your organization like while this is happening. So like this doesn't happen quickly if you're a big company. And so this is like an extended period of time of people hearing it's coming, it's starting to get leaked, it's starting to this, and then, when is it actually going to happen? And then it actually happens. So like for the 6 months that people hear it's coming, everyone stops. Like literally
Right.
nobody is showing up in the way that you need. And then it does happen. And then in the, years after that, people are still like trying to, and then it's years because it happens again so frequently that it just like keeps this crew like always on stall mode. And so it's almost like a self-fulfilling cycle. It's like because you're hindering your ability to grow or like actually get any real momentum, you keep cutting yourself off at the legs, but you're not doing the right thing. So like this is the only move you have. You just have to keep cutting it on the P&L because you got no other option.
Does,
It's gonna look like shit
right?
no matter what. And so I don't know. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it ends up being. That's all I always explain it. And I've lived through this many times and been on both sides, right? Where, been on the leadership side where 6 months of planning to do a significant reduction in workforce to the leader who's like now being told, go find an outsourcing type of a firm to come back in and do the work we need them to do. And looking at the numbers and going, would have been just cheaper to keep the original team to begin with. But in general, it's always about moving from the biggest cost line on almost every company's financials and income statements are those as the line for employee, like for employees,
Yeah.
always is the most expensive.
Yeah.
But they're the part of your business that nothing else can do what they do. And that actually is going to really increase with AI because the stuff that like machines could do will now be done by the machines, increasing the value of human capital because they do stuff that the AI can't do. So maybe we'll see what happens in maybe this next iteration. But this story is for sure a glitch for me. It's been there forever. It has nothing to do with the people, has nothing to do with the people's abilities, their contribution to the company. It has all to do with numbers.
And like, so if you're an individual or even like a leader or a company in this situation, like, is it a pure glitch? Is there any, forward path of thinking? Like, how can people weather the storm, I guess, is what I'm thinking.
Mm.
Are there any insights or nuggets that we can chat through that would help people in this circumstance? Because this is a shitty circumstance and it's going to be hard for people, companies, for all of it. Like, it's just so much churn. And so how do we think about, an thoughtful support or at least even a nugget? Or is it just that we feel for you and here's our empathy and our hugs? Like tough shit, this is a glitch.
Yeah, like I think it depends on how a company's doing it. In my experience, though, most of the time it's formulaic. It has very little to do with, I assume that if you're insulated in some point of, well, I'll give you an example, right? Like you could be the top performer, but if you were the last one, in and the formula is get rid of, protect longer tenured people and get rid of newer people, then it doesn't matter how great you are as a top performer. But the other thing could be the other flip is you could be a really great performer. You've maybe done decades of work with a company and they just want to get the formula is reduce the dollars to the maximum with the least number of people. So in that formula, you're starting at the top of the tenure scale and you're working your way down. Well, certainly there are some when people have some sort of skills that nobody else does that will help insulate you and protect you from these situations, but lots of times it is really formulaic.
Yeah. I love that though, in the sense of like, we can't do anything to control that situation, but for any individuals affected by it, that's such a good callback to you to because like that's a really hard situation to go through as a person. That is like you're really looking in, you're maybe feeling really terrible about yourself. Like, was I not enough? Was I this? There's so many internal raw questions in that circumstance
Yeah.
for people. And so I love the framing that you had in that sense of just like you really like just know, like, you can separate yourself from that scenario in the sense, like, you didn't necessarily do something to cause that scenario. You didn't necessarily, you are enough in that sense, you know what I mean? And so, like, you are enough, and how can you, really anchor on that so that just doesn't become a confidence crusher into the next thing? Because I know a lot
Yeah.
in my life who's that has happened to it, it has been a huge confidence crusher when that happens.
So that's a good point. Where then that goes back to what is that little tidbit is that by making sure that you're always building on your own personal development, that you are always adding to your leverage in any company and how you would stand out,
Yeah.
that you might not be able to control this scenario, but what that allows you to do is bounce back faster. So what I, also know that anybody who's ever been part of one of these downsizes or layoffs is that the best people, the highest performers that were in that group will also quickly become a high performer at the next
At the
company
next
because
place.
companies will always hire people that have exceptional professional career resumes and can demonstrate their ability to get high performing results. And so that's the piece. That's the reason you still want to build leverage. You still want to be making sure you have skills and results that demonstrate or complement the professional brand you want to bring because that will help you recover. And then
Yeah.
you'll get over that horrible feeling in your chest much faster.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Intentionality, that's what I'm hearing you say, like,
exactly.
intentionality around you, what you bring to the table, your brand, what you've done, your successes, and anchoring that not only for yourself, but for your next move. Is that fair?
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like it.
So, this is a really good place to go in to the daily action. So, we call this your Monday action because our podcast comes out on Mondays, but it's an action to do the day after. And this week we were talking about like, what do you do thinking about every morning in which you're creating that leverage, that skill, that thing that differentiates you professionally?
Mhm.
And maybe that's the challenge for our audience today.
Yep, I like that. The way that it was drafted was, am I building leverage or losing it? So I like that phrase
Yeah,
because just thinking like, and by building leverage, that's leverage for yourself. Don't do it for somebody else. It's leverage for you. And so how are you, being your own advocate in that way? How are you being your own champion? Do you have a sense of who that is? Like, who are you? And how are you doing things actively, knowing that there's these things that you're facing? You can take control of it and you can help steer your own boat in that adversity. And I like that. I like that Monday ask.
yeah, I do too.
Yeah,
I do too. And I think there's lots of people who feel like their leverage is diminishing. AI is doing something that they maybe used to do, or maybe they feel like they can't get them, they don't know how to get the maximum out of the AI that's surrounded by. But this is a way to just make it intentional. And I
totally.
love that as an ask. So let's see how that works.
Let's see it. Let's see what we come up with next week when we come back. I'm going to have to think about this.
Exactly.
I know.
Okay, let's close the show. Obviously, we're really thankful for anybody who's listening, sharing, posting, liking, telling all your friends about.
Engaging.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
yeah,
be a part of the club.
exactly. So, thank you all for listening. Bree, thanks for this great conversation. I look
Yeah,
forward to this hour every day.
I
I guess
know.
every week that we go to spend an hour talking.
We were like, we talk about some really good stuff. We should just start videotaping it because there's some good nuggets in here.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
is.
Okay.
Okay. Well, have a great evening. We'll
You
talk to you
too.
next week.
Talk to
Okay.
you later.
Bye.